Hi, Whitey here. I want to share my experiences with the Mars Industry 118 Scale Airwolf project. I first learned about the project from a friend who had placed an order already for a full built kit. Upon reviewing Mars website, I was able to see you had the option for a pre-built kit or a do-it-yourself assembly kit. I placed my order on August 21st of 2021 for the unbuilt kit. Being a fairly experienced modeler myself, I started out in science fiction kits many years ago and since progressed to 118 scale military vehicles. You can see an assortment of models that I've completed here in fiberglass and resin, mainly garage kits. So I was pretty confident in my ability to build out the kit, and there was obviously a substantial price difference between the unbuilt and the built kits. Having been involved in a lot of these projects, I know that these can take a lot of time and be very complicated. Most of the kits I built were garage kits, that people made, making their own molds, casting in resin, etc. So I knew what a long, complex process this could be. I was really excited to start this project, especially with it being 3D printed. I had recently built a classified scale Fang helicopter, and with the 3D printing, the resin materials being used now, these kits are such a joy to put together and really, really give you a great finished product. And I hope that I would avoid a lot of the jankiness that you could have sometimes with the resin kits. They can be rather complicated. They're all handmade, hand cast, hand poured. So you have tons of flash, tons of cleanup, things like that. And again, the timeline can be greatly accelerated. Speaking of timelines, Mars Industry promised an October 2021 delivery of the model, which I thought seemed rather ambitious since they were only showing an unfinished prototype at that point, but it did seem like it could definitely be possible. So at this point, I settled in for the long wait that I anticipated for the kit, and wait I certainly did. Updates came very scarce. In fact, I don't believe I ever received any email updates for the project, but I knew later on a Kickstarter was offered and there were some things that went on along that way. But I was not on Kickstarter. I'm not on Facebook. So I was few and far between on the updates. I do participate in Twitter, and I was able to follow Mars on there and did ask once or twice for a status update, which Mars provided. It was also during this time I started to notice some slight changes going on with Mars and their communications towards customers. I did also notice that the language on the kit order on their website had changed from, as you can see earlier, just a kit to the verbiage of prototype being inserted, which I thought was interesting, but things change, marketing changes. I didn't think much of that, but it will come back into play later on. I also noticed that they started to turn off their replies on Twitter, and I'm understanding that they've done that on all their social media. And they continue to solicit orders even after the pre-order went on, which I'll admit, after what became about a year of waiting, kind of seemed a little odd to me, but at the same time, I tried to be patient. And then I finally did receive notice that my order had shipped on 8/31 of 22. So almost a year to the date later, my order is shipped, my long wait is over, and I'm very excited to receive my kit. As soon as I received my kit, it was very obvious there were a number of defects with the kit. I won't get into all these. As you can see from the pictures, and then Mars quick response, they had admitted that there were some issues with the kit, and a lot of the things that I noticed initially on my inspection of the kit are detailed on a YouTube video by the creator Kessel Run. He goes into great detail of a lot of the deficiencies and just kind of oddities in general with the kit. So I won't rehash all that. Make sure to check out his videos if you want more information on it. And Mars quickly communicated there was a misprint. Different size parts were sent and to expect new ones. So at that time, I was okay with that. I mean, mistakes happen. It seemed kind of odd to me that there would be so many parts that were clearly defective, that were sticky with resin, that did not fit correctly, and that someone could hand assemble these and send them out. But again, I was trying to be patient with the kit's creator. I know they're not a professional and wanted to give them as much leeway as possible. So I once again set in for a long wait for replacement parts. And while I'm waiting, I did want to address the fact that, there's been a lot of talk about Mars Industry being a scammer and intentionally setting out to rip people off and take their money. And I really don't believe that that was the intention when all this started. The proof I would provide is that certificate of authenticity that I just showed. I don't think that's someone who was out to rip people off, along with the custom box that they mailed the kits in, really set out to do bad things. Now, obviously, things have went a little sideways since that point, but, I think that they were truly trying to do the right thing and deliver a fun project to everyone. So I keep coming back to that, even though I do get frustrated at points with this kit and this process, but I really do feel that that was not their intention. On December 1st of 2022, I received an email from Mars that the parts are ready, being boxed up, and will ship out the following Monday. At last, I feel like my wait is over. Things are good. I can finally build my kit. I'm excited. I'm going to be able to work on it over my Christmas break. So everything seems right. But then about a month passes by and I don't receive any further communication nor the parts from Mars. At this point, I decide to email them, just inquiring what's going on. I don't receive a response. I wait about a week. I email them again, politely asking for a status update. I receive no response. At this point, I've become concerned that I'm not going to receive my parts. I have a kit that I can't build, doesn't look very good anyway, and obviously has some issues. So I call my credit card company and initiate a chargeback. I don't like being ignored, and I feel as though this may have transitioned into a bad cause. Lo and behold, I receive the parts the following Monday after initiating the chargeback. Did the chargeback initiate the parts being sent? Were they already being sent? Honestly, I don't know. So at this point, I'm faced with the dilemma. Do I do the right thing and stop the chargeback, hope everything else is going to work out with the kit, or do I continue on with my frustration of waiting, going on, 2 calendar years now before receiving my kit? But my integrity is not worth $200 and some, so I call my credit card company and stop the chargeback. I feel that I have what I need now to complete the kit. It may not be ideal, but I'm going to go ahead with it. And the new parts really did look great. For starters, they're cast in black, which is really nice and should play well for the people receiving the pre-built kits later on. The only real issue I've seen was a little bit of stickiness here and there. Nothing too bad, nothing compared to the earlier parts, as well as being very thin. And for something that's being marketed as a toy, when you can hold it up and see light through it, it does seem a little thin. But overall, I'm satisfied and feel I can proceed. So I lay out all the parts and get started building the kit on February 8th of 2023. And this is where a little bit of my naivete with these resin printed parts comes into play, because I fully don't understand with traditional resin casts. A lot of times you have to clean off the molding agent using a strong scrubbing agent. I use Comet, and that's obviously not the case with these models, as I learn later on. But I do some research because I am concerned with the strong 3D printing lines all over the body of the helicopter. And I'm aware of people using a resin coat to smooth out these lines. I'm showing a video here with someone outlining the process, and decide that this is my best way forward, because sanding doesn't always work really well with these in my experience, and really can not give you the result you want. And if you take a look here at my work versus the prototype displayed on the Mars Industry website, I think you can really see it does add a lot and really make the model look smooth, nice, and I complete the process over the main hull of the ship, brushing on extremely light coats of the clear resin and then curing it with a UV light and ultimately full sunlight. I also work on puttying together the two halves of the hull, which have a significant gap, using epoxy putty. Overall, I'm happy with the result at this point. I move on to work on the weapons launcher, which was printed in filament and had a lot of issues. Like most of the filament printed portions of this model, there's a lot of distortion, a lot of visible print lines, and all the ends of the launchers are completely full of filament plugs that need to be removed. When you remove those plugs, it actually completely destroys the barrels of the launchers, and I needed to rebuild them with brass and aluminum tube, which in the end I think looks better and maybe even look better than a 3D print. With the barrels all squared away, I turned my attention back to the hull of the ship, continue puttying and working through priming, making sure that it's absolutely smooth so I can get a nice, glossy, beautiful finish on it. One of the downsides to the clear resin coat I did was you could struggle to see some of the little ripples and whatnot in the resin. It did make it a little difficult, which added a lot of puttying on my part. Again, my first time doing this technique, and I wanted to make sure that it looked completely smooth. But at this point, the model is completely primed. I'm ready to move on to painting the final finishing coats and start to do research for paint choices. The final paint color decisions actually turned out to be a little more difficult than I anticipated. In my mind, Airwolf was always black with a white belly, but I looked through a lot of reference material and I was kind of seeing different things. The actual ship itself has been moved around over the years, repainted, been in museums, private collections. The old vintage reference material is not the greatest, haven't been on television, things like that. So I moved on to YouTube to look at some builds of people who had built some of the scale models to kind of get their take on it. That's when I came across Kessel Run's videos detailing some of the issues that he noticed with the kits. One thing that stood out to me that really concerned me, especially at this point in my build where I'm nearly ready to put on the final coats of paint and be done, is he discovered encapsulated resin. When you install the landing gears on this Airwolf, the holes are too small, which is a common theme across all of it. All the magnet pockets are too small. They all have to be dremelled out, drilled, etc., resized to get the magnets fit in. And at this point, I'd really like to call out that the magnets were a fantastic idea. They're a really cool, innovative idea to avoid hinges, which tend to be a problem in all these garage-built type models. They stress, they break, just like our vintage G.I. Joe toys over time. And the magnets seem like a really good workaround. But again, back on topic, the wheel wells need to have the axles drilled out in order to insert the wheels, because as I mentioned, as with all the engineering in this kit, it's off. And what I observed when he did this, as well as I did, you have to countersink the axles to mount the wheel assemblies into the underbelly of the helicopter. And he had resin leaking out of it. So I was very concerned. I basically followed his process of installing the wheels. Lo and behold, resin starts leaking out of my model. At this point, I start thinking back to all the sticky parts, the resin leakage in the box. It all starts to add up and make sense. So I go through trying to examine where the resin could be coming from, and I narrow it down to a couple spots on the hull, which would obviously be enclosed areas. With Kessel Run's explanation that this is encapsulated resin from the printing process that was unable to vent, it all makes sense. So I set about trying to discover all the areas where the resin has been encapsulated. One of them is on the pods that mount on the side. Now, since then, Mars Industry has insinuated that this was caused by me somehow resin coating with a clear resin the exterior of the model. Well, you can obviously see from my photos and the documentation provided here that this is gray resin, not clear resin, that was encapsulated in these parts. So unless I have a way to teleport gray resin inside of these encapsulated parts, it's pretty easy to see what happened here, that their parts were not properly vented and an encapsulated printing resin during the process. Mars Industry even acknowledged this during their live stream, which we'll get into later, that they were aware of some of these parts having resin leaks. So somehow trying to turn it back on me that this is my fault or I've done something wrong, I just don't understand that. I believe the evidence is very clear, as you can see from these photos and videos of the resin leaking out, that it's nothing I had done. These were defects during the production of the vehicle. You can see the large amount of resin in here. And again, this is something I'm not super familiar with because I don't do resin 3D printing. I have printed filament before. I have a basic understanding of it, but I'm by no means an expert, which is why I would buy this kit instead of manufacturing it myself. But you can definitely see here, especially in those pods on the side, the resin leaking out. I drilled a hole, verified there was liquid resin in there, then came in with a Dremel tool, opened up the cavity, and you can see the resin leaking out. So it's at this point, after nearly a year and a half of dealing with this process, that I do speak out publicly, post pictures of the resin leaking on my Twitter feed, and ask for some direction of what to do, because at this point I'm concerned about the long-term stability of the model. I'm concerned what's going to happen going forward. I don't receive any response from Mars. I've even poked them a couple times about this. I received no response, but then Mars posts a public statement, if you will, I guess prompted by Kessel Run's videos as well as my pictures. It's an interesting statement at that. I'll leave it up here for you guys to look at, or you can find it on any of their social media. I honestly don't know what to say. At some point in there, I'm obviously attacked. It's a little unclear. There's several people being lashed out there, and I just don't understand treating your customers like this. But anyway, that's what goes on. And then shortly thereafter, they engage in a live stream with Retroblasting, who somehow got pulled into this. I guess they had shown the prototype, which I had seen those videos after I had backed it. It had no influence on me one way or the other. It's not a channel that I watch regularly. I've maybe watched it a couple times here and there. I'm aware of them. But I join on the live stream. I'm trying to answer some questions. Ask some questions. Mars Industry specifically calls me out, says that I've monkey banged their kit, and this is all my fault. I will not receive any assistance because I've somehow done something wrong, which seems very unusual to me. But after the live stream, I get on the video and just try to make a couple comments thanking Retroblasting for hosting them, which I did genuinely appreciate because I wasn't part of the Kickstarter. I am not on Facebook, and it seemed like what of the live stream I got to hear, I had to leave it about halfway through or so. And quite frankly, I had heard enough. I didn't want to hear any more of what he had to say at that point. He had lost some credibility in my mind. But to thank them for hosting the video, and just to point out that my build was up on Twitter if anybody wanted to take a look at it. At which point my comments are deleted off of Retroblasting, which I thought was interesting because I was basically thanking them for doing the video. And again, this is my naivete with the social media world, because I guess as you can see from the video here, they set my comments to auto delete after this. So even though as you can see, I'm not posting anything incendiary or mean, my comments are deleted. They deny deleting them. I have no idea what all this means, but it seems very unusual to me. And that's where we're going to leave all of that. So at this point, Mars Industry does send me a message on Twitter, as you can see, basically making some accusations. And I simply respond that they stated if they've done something wrong, they will make it right. That's what I expect. As long as they come through on that, we're square and we have no issues. That was the last communication that I received at this point, which has been over a month ago from Mars. And I've have to now make the decision, do I continue on with this model or do I just throw it in the garbage and move on? So with a substantial investment of both time and money into this model, I decide that I'm going to go ahead with a solution that would make the Joker very happy and cleanse the interior of the model using alcohol and acetone. I brush it, I scrub it, rinse it out, and then use my UV light as best I can to cure the areas where I can get access to. I set the model aside to dry and start working on some of the other bits and pieces that had given me difficulty, including the front landing gear, which again, the magnet was too large for the area provided. So I decided to reinforce it with brass plate, as well as the rotors, which again, because the pivots were filament printed have broken because the filament is just not strong enough. I replaced those with brass tube, as well as the rear computer chair, which again has broken due to being filament printed, and replace it with sturdier brass tube, which I believe will allow it. I set to work on the gun pods, which were again improperly 3D printed. Be lucky I'm not your dentist, because obviously my Dremel work leaves a little bit to be desired here, but I'm not super concerned because this is going to be on the bottom and not visible. In the end, I'm really happy with the result. I think it looks good considering what I started out with and what I was able to finish. I'm also able to address some of the gaps in the parts and the sides and get a better fit and finish. So I'm kind of grateful that I have that chance to take another look at it. I also start color matching, as has been stated. Phantom Gray Metallic is the proper color, but I'm just not happy with that color. I think it looks too gray, too silver, and I end up settling on a Duplicolor color. I'll list that for anyone that's interested, which has like a black metallic finish to it, and I think it looks good. And now it's a lacquer paint in a rattle can, which can be quite hot and hard to work with. I settle on a light gray for the bottom, and then back to that Duplicolor on the top, which I think came out looking phenomenal. And at least in my mind, it looks like what Airwolf looked like back in the day. I also paint up the interior bits with a fair bit of masking on the main rotor, and work on that rotor, which broke as I was removing the tape. Yes, the rotor broke, simply removing tape from it. I thought about reinforcing originally, again, because it was filament printed, but I didn't. Now I wish I would have, but I'm able to kind of fix it and get it to a place where I'm happy with it. As you can see here, I think the model looks good. I'm proud of the work I've done, especially when you compare it with the prototype displayed on the Mars Industry website. I think it looks good. So I turn my attention to the interior computer details, as well as the dash. As you can see, the figures are a bit of a tight fit. 3 3/4 figures do fit well, but Modern Joes are just too long. So one of the things that I need to do is to go back and kind of fit in the computer panel, if you will, stretch it out a bit to get it to fit in there, and then Dremel off a little bit of the edge. At which point, guess what? The gift that keeps on giving, more leaking resin from the computer panel. At this point, I'm ready to tackle the final hurdle to completing this model, the windows. The vacuum formed windows were vacuum formed over a 3D printed buck that was not smoothed out. So there are facets, lines, etc. on the vacuum formed windows. They're actually great vacuum formed. They look good, but they fit-wise, but they are completely faceted and ugly, as you can see from both Mars demonstration as well as Kessel runs. So I use an old modeling trick to really clear them out. It takes a lot of steps, but I'm very happy in the end. And I add the small access panel, and I finished up the interior as well as the exterior. And overall, I think it looks good. I probably could have put some more interior detail, but I'm just ready to be done with this project, and I've lost my patience for it. So you see, again, the comparison here of my finished model with what's displayed on the Mars Industry website. And I think I've done a very good job. I think it looks crisp, smooth. Are there imperfections? Yes. But the model overall looks very good. Like I've stated before, the magnetic pods are really neat. And scrolling through some of my pictures here, you can see it with them removed in a cruise mode or with the weapons deployed. Has a good look to it, and I'm very happy overall at the end of it. I've got quite a few pictures here that I'll kind of talk through, and as well as my final thoughts. I apologize for the length of this video, but as you can see, it's been quite a journey getting from here to there. And I wish my photography skills were half as good as my modeling skills. They're obviously not from the quality of my pictures, but I think you can get a gist of what I was able to do with this. And I do think, you know, someone with a better eye towards perfection probably could have even made this kit look better than myself. But again, I'm pretty happy with it. It's going to get set up on a shelf. It probably won't get, you know, messed with or played with very often, and which is probably a good thing, because some of the fragility You can see that 3 3/4 figures and 4-inch figures next to it. The 3 3/4 really do work better. If I would have been thinking ahead, I would have extended the cabin out a little bit, as well as the animation my son did there in the battle we always wish we had when we were kids. And you'll see the model here again, the 1/18 Hind E helicopter that I built up from a resin kit, which again is fragile, not a toy, more of a display piece. But you can really see the size of the Hind here. And keep in mind, the Airwolf is not small. As you compare it here to the G.I. Joe Tomahawk, you'll see it's a good size model. And I'm not sure if 100% if it's true 18th scale, but it's pretty close. And it definitely fits in well. You'll see this displayed across a lot of my models. Getting the Tomahawk and the Airwolf in one shot was difficult, again, in my makeshift photo studio on the pool table, but you'll see that next to the G.I. Joe Dragonfly to really get a true sense of the scale, as well as the Ultimate Soldier 1/18 Huey helicopter and the Super Cobra. You'll also see the size, and the Super Cobra is a large helicopter, as well as the Little Bird here. You'll also get a view of both of them together. And then some final shots of the Airwolf in the end. I'm happy that it came out as well as it did. And will it split open like Clark Griswold's turkey on Christmas due to all the uncured resin percolating inside of it? Who knows? It's unprecedented in my opinion. All I can do is hope the Mars Industry will, as they have stated, make it right and send me one of their new and improved kits whenever those go into production. Until then, I guess I'll just be waiting like Charlie Brown at my mailbox for one of the new and improved kits. Thank you for following along on my journey, and I hope you found this interesting.